So when is the right time to give your child a phone, and how can you tell if they're ready? I suppose the new year's kind of started, and this may have been or is something front of mind for many parents. So let's talk about it. We're going to talk about it with Dany Elachi, who is the founder of Heads Up Alliance. Dany, welcome to National Weekend Evenings.
Thank you for having me, Sirine.
Let's start with your daughter, with Alia. So at what age did your daughter, Alia, ask for a phone? Let's get straight into your experience, because it's a really interesting one to explore, of course.
Well, yeah, Alia's now 15, going on to 16 later in the year. This is about 5 years ago now, so she was about 10 years of age when she first really started pestering her mum and I for a phone. And, like many parents, we're in that boat where we're not sure what to do, but when they come home and tell you that they're the only ones that don't have a phone, it becomes a very powerful argument. And there's only so much of that type of pleading that a parent can withstand. And we caved in. We look back now and we think that probably wasn't the right way to go, but
at the same time,
but we did. We caved in because she said that everyone else had one, and despite all of our misgivings, we thought, well, I guess if everyone else has one, then we don't want her to be isolated from her friends. So we did. We caved in and gave her a phone at that age.
So how was it after you said yes and Alia had her phone?
Well, it played out exactly as we feared.
Okay.
We tried to set down some rules, but I guess sometimes we parents, we're a little bit naive in thinking that maybe if we can agree on a certain set of rules that they'll be followed.
When you say as you feared,
and everything will be okay, but we forget that these phones, they're addiction machines. Okay. So it's almost like asking an alcoholic not to drink, but here's a bottle of whiskey, keep it in your pocket. Okay. It's not going to work.
When you say it played out as you feared, can you just elaborate on that a little bit? So how did it play out, and what was the fear attached to that?
Well, just simple things like spending time with family. We used to cherish, the time after school when we would get to spend time with our children, when she would spend time with her siblings, playing outside. She used to be such an avid reader, and we noticed that during that period, books just simply couldn't compete with that shiny device that was constantly pinging and drawing her attention.
Okay.
Simple things like just helping out with dinner. It was almost impossible to get her to come out into those common spaces in the home and be part of the family like she used to. And that all happened within the space of a couple of months.
Okay.
And then the straw that broke the camel's back for her mum and I were finding that she was, in her bed at night, close to midnight, where she should be sleeping, of course, and, busily messaging friends. And, of course we had some rules around that, but, we all lead very busy lives, and as
you
parents,
can't 24/7 be on top of
ball and
and I think there is that desire to try and, I don't know, do they call them helicopter parents? I'm not sure, but I think in general it's more of that wanting to instill that sense of responsibility, to our children, as opposed to always having to impose responsibility upon them. And you said that at the outset, like you tried to just set some guidelines or some rules, like I suppose, phone rules. What were they, and like how did that go, given what you've just talked about, Dany, in terms of just noticing those changes of this increase in screen time and decrease in all of those other things?
Look, I mean, I know that as a fully fledged adult, I set rules in place for myself about how and when I should use my phone, and I break them almost every day. And again, it's perhaps no wonder that we do, because that's what the phones are designed to do. They're designed to suck every spare moment of our lives. They're designed to have our eyes on them as often as possible, because that's how the app makers make their money.
Yeah.
And how we possibly think our children would fare any better than than even us adults with, fully formed brains and everything else going on, is quite amazing that we think that children will somehow do better than what even many of us adults can't manage.
So, Dany, then came a point where Alia didn't have a phone anymore. Tell us about how that came about, and how was Alia?
Okay, well, fortunately for us, at around the same time that we were really starting to think we've made a mistake and we want to pull this back, the phone, which was a second-hand phone to begin with, stopped working. And so we took the opportunity at that time to say to her that, look, we've had a really good think. We've had a couple of months now to see how it's going to interact with your childhood. And we just think that your childhood is way more precious and way more important than to be spent away from family, away from the outdoors, away from all the good things that you used to do that you now simply don't have time or inclination for anymore. And of course, she wasn't happy about that decision to pull it back, but it was one of those things where she just had to trust us as parents that we loved her too much and we wanted what was best for her, and what was best for her was something that perhaps she couldn't see, but it was a decision that we had to just make in order to restore what we saw was her childhood. Because the average child in Australia, Sirine, the average teen is spending 4 to 5 hours per day on social media. Social media alone, that's not screen time, that's just social media alone.
Okay.
On average. So, if we just put to the side the appropriateness of some of the content that they're consuming, 4 to 5 hours a day of anything is no good. And I often say, if our children were reading 4 to 5 hours of Shakespeare every day, after a week or two, we'd say, that's now getting a little bit too much. How about you do something else as well?
I understand. No, well, actually, look, this is on a personal level for me, is that I couldn't agree more. I think a conversation that's constant in our household, for all of us, not just, the child, but also for the grown-up, is just balancing things out. And we sometimes remind ourselves, if something is a bit off kilter, it's like, I've been spending too much. And this is too much of something that's not necessarily bad for you. Like you said, reading something like Shakespeare. I really enjoy crocheting. I like spending time crocheting, but sometimes I've got to be conscious that sometimes I can spend too much time crocheting and I've got to peel myself back. So I really get your point. I mean, it drives it drives it home, I think, and really puts an emphasis on, not only the things that are probably, well, of course, there's harmful sides of it in terms of the phone and social media and access and safety and privacy, but just in general, in terms of just trying to maintain balance of where time is spent.
Yeah, it's what it takes away. So it's one thing for adults to spend 4 or 5 hours a day crocheting, for example. But you've got, adulthood lasts for decades. Childhood comes once.
Yes.
You've only got a few precious years to be a child. And, it's so sad to think that there's a generation of children now that are going to look back on their childhood and it's filled not with the memories that perhaps our generation had or previous generations had, but it's going to be filled mostly with time spent on a screen. And that just isn't what childhood is meant to be about.
Can you talk to me about was this the catalyst ultimately, your experience, to launch Heads Up Alliance?
Yeah, we didn't plan, my wife and I didn't set out to launch a national movement. We just planned to make our daughter's life easier. And so when she spent those first few weeks literally crying herself to sleep because we decided to take the phone away, which, by the way, in itself should speak to the addictive nature of the phone.
The overreaction, yes.
Yeah, only after a couple of months, it was not an easy process to pull it back from her. And that wasn't easy for us either to listen to her in such distress. So we just thought the only way we could maybe help her through this was to reach out to other families in her school and to see if they too wanted to hold out smartphones and social media a few more years with us so that she could feel that she wasn't entirely alone on this journey. And that's how it started. It was a conversation with, I think it was on WhatsApp, the local school WhatsApp in her grade. Hey guys, any other parents struggling with this? We've just had a couple of very rough months. And, lo and behold, a few parents put their hand up and said, yeah, we thought that we would be the crazy parents if we didn't give our children phones. But it would be great to link up with other families and if we could all delay together. And that way, if everybody misses out, then nobody misses
numbers.
out. And
yeah.
so that was the model that we managed to achieve in our local school, and it's now spread to other parts of the country as well. Yeah.
Dany Elachi is the founder of Heads Up Alliance, and he joins me on ABC Radio's National Weekend Evenings. If you have just joined us, you're with me, Sirine Demachkie. We're talking about giving when's the right time to give our children a phone, and also going to start to get into the conversation and talk about how to know if they're or when they're ready.
Why scroll when you can listen on the ABC Listen app? Listen to shows like ABC News Daily,
ABC Sport Daily,
and Conversations. Get on the ABC Listen app today and every day. Across ABC Radio, this is Sirine Demachkie.
So, Dany, can you tell us a little bit about the work you're doing at Heads Up Alliance?
So over the last few years, we've been very much involved in advocating for the removal of smartphones from New South Wales state schools. Our local member happens to be the Premier, Chris Minns, who at the time when we approached him initially was in opposition. He loved what we were doing. And he made an electoral promise at the time that if he were to be elected Premier, that what he would do is ensure that smartphones were taken out of the school day. He has jurisdiction over public schools. And when he was elected, I believe 2 years ago now, that was one of the very first things he did. And
out of the school day, Dany, sorry, just to clarify, when you say out of the school day, because I'm just thinking about some schools in terms of, it's not a matter of not, the kids bring it to school, they take it to the office, it stays in the office, then they pick it up at the end of the day. Are we talking about that?
Different schools do it differently. Some say keep it in your bag, it's out of sight. And if it's seen, there will be repercussions.
Okay.
Some schools have pouches, magnetic lockable pouches. So every school does it differently, but the principle is that between the hours of 9 and 3, they should not be seen or heard or used, which we think is such a no-brainer, to have 6 hours free of social media and smartphones so that kids can focus on their lessons and interact with each other at lunchtime and play sport and do all the things that they didn't do for a few years, because everyone was just sitting there on their phone instead of playing basketball or whatever.
Yes. And I had cut you off. You were talking about Chris Minns and how he came into office and talking about that being one of the first things on the agenda. Yeah,
the only thing I was going to say was that a few months ago, after a year of this policy coming into place, he called it as the best thing his government had ever done in the time that he's been in office. So it's been a resounding success. It's been a resounding success in Queensland and Victoria and every other state where it's done. And, I'm happy to say that every single public school in every state in the country has now got that policy in place. Another thing that we were involved in last year was advocating for the increase in age for social media citizenship. So I'm
social
sure
media
heard
citizenship
about all of that.
Oh, that's the access. I've never heard of it referred to as citizenship before, but that's the access. Is that right? Like, as in being able to have your own social media account.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Okay.
So, the Albanese government passed laws. I think it was November of last year.
Yeah.
So that we are the first in the world now to have such a law in place. So that children under the age of 16 simply cannot sign up to a social media account. Now, that still hasn't come into effect. It will be coming into effect in December of this year. But and so there are details being worked out. But we think that was a great move. It's inspiring many other countries around the world to look at what we're doing and hopefully follow suit.
Yeah.
And Heads Up Alliance was, very much involved in advocating for those new laws as well.
You know, I was, just thinking about asking you, or even just trying to explore your thoughts on whether or not we're actually delaying the inevitable. But when I think about that and think about the conversation we've had up until now, it's almost there, isn't it? You've talked about this in the sense that that the retort you gave in terms of adulthood lasts for decades, childhood doesn't last as long. And it's really about that letting kids be kids. And I'm thinking of a saying in another language. I'm actually thinking of a saying in Arabic and trying to translate that in my head to English right now. But it's one of those things where, as in, there is a time for things, and there is a time to have, a phone, especially
Precisely.
one that can impact.
As I mentioned from the outset, many of us adults are addicted to these devices, and I guess once we're adults, we're a little bit more. We could be a bit more responsible for our own decisions. But I think to inflict something like this, that we now know that these social media companies design their apps to be deliberately addictive. We know this now. It's not a secret. And why we would inflict that upon childhood, upon our children, and essentially change the entire nature of what childhood is. Never has there been in the history of humanity has there been something that has sucked that much of a child's childhood. And I think you've hit the nail on the head, Sirine. All we're trying to do is buy a few more years so that our children can have that precious childhood. And then as adults, of course, if they want to knock themselves out on 10 hours of TikTok every day, well, I guess they're adults and they're free to make their own choices, just like we are with smoking and drinking and other things that may harm us to excess. Then, you're an adult and you can go ahead and knock yourself out. But I think for children, we need to step in as parents and as educators and as the adults in the room and to say, you know what, no, we're not going to let you lose your childhood. And we've already lost a generation and we've seen enough damage. And no, we're just going to let you get back your sleep, get back your rest, get back your sanity, get back to building your real face-to-face relationships with your friends in real life. And then, so to the question of when is a good age, I reckon about 36 might be a good time to give your child a smartphone or social media.
Can we go back to Alia for a second? Does she have a phone now? You said that she's, I think, 15 going on 16 now, and this, obviously, your experience was 5 years ago. So, does she have a phone now? And if so, how's it going?
She doesn't, and I was only joking about 36, but at the moment she is nearly 16.
Yeah.
She still doesn't have a phone,
okay.
But I'll tell you what she does have. She still has friends, and the son still gets up in the morning, and life goes on, and she's got a wonderful social life. And a lot of parents do worry sometimes that if my daughter or son doesn't have a phone, what's that going to mean for them? And I'd love to shout this from the rooftops. It means more time for sleep, more time for real-life family relationship, more friend relationship, more time for reading, more time for, more focus on their study, more time for exercise, sport, play, so many things. So there's so much upside to it. And, of course, there's a little bit of downside, but it just doesn't compare.
Yeah. Can we then go to 36, we might be stretching, although I'd probably be with you. I'm sure my husband wouldn't disagree either. But if we can maybe take a parent's perspective, and again, I'm maybe just thinking of myself, maybe there are others out there thinking the same, in terms of reaching particular age, maybe even going into high school, when maybe particularly going into high school, the first year, for many, primary school, we're used to dropping off our children and picking them up. The public schools, I'm thinking just state schools, are usually, closer to home maybe. But then again, in regional and rural areas, it's even different. So there are so many different life experiences, but there's that element of as they get older, there is independence that you start to impart. And what about wanting to keep in touch, making sure that they've arrived safely at a particular destination, making sure that they're okay, giving them the opportunity to, if they need to call you for anything. I suppose, when is the right time, and how can a parent tell, and what are some things to look for that kind of call out when a right time might be?
Okay, Serena, I think you make a point that many parents would agree with you about, which is, being able to reach your children perhaps once they've reached high school. And I sympathise with that to an extent. And we say to parents, in the Heads Up Alliance, we say to parents, we ask parents to make a commitment not to give their children a smartphone until at least the end of year 8.
Okay.
But do better if you can. But we say that if you're one of those parents that feels like you do need to have that contact with your child, there are many retro phones on the market, phones that only have call and texting capabilities, and they're more than sufficient for parents who have those concerns. We don't need to be tracking our children 24/7. So, you mentioned independence.
That's right.
We're precisely taking away their independence when we give them a smartphone.
And trying to build some honesty.
Every time they land in a moment of trouble, mum's only a phone call away. Every answer to the world is only 5 keyboard
seconds
strokes
away. Yeah.
There's no chance for them to actually, work things out, work through problems. Heaven forbid they might need to speak to somebody to get an answer or to move to the next stage of whatever they're trying to get to. I actually think giving a child a phone takes away their independence.
It's an interesting perspective, isn't it? On the text line, I think it's Jane on the text line, our teen twins got a phone in year 5 and 6. Yes, they use the phone, but no more than they would the iPad. They get off at the same time each night. If not, the internet is turned off. Keep the boundaries and they will respect the rules. So there's a thought there from Jane. Thank you, Jane. I think thinking about that, knowing if your child is ready. Are there some things in terms of, from a child's perspective, everyone's different, maybe some things any things to kind of look for? I don't know, Dany, just curious on your thoughts. So anything like, is it a matter of showing or demonstrating a sense of responsibility? You know your kid. Like if you're spending time with your kid, you know your kid. And if you're kind of thinking, oh my goodness, no way would I be even putting anything, retro or not, in my child's, like I'm going one extreme or another. But it is.
Serene, look, I get the question you're asking. And I think one of my bugbears is that often, cyber safety educators who get asked that same question will always give a wishy-washy answer.
Okay.
And say things like, keep the boundaries, you draw up a contract, tell your child to think twice before they post something online, and all these things. But you're talking. I'm not the person who's going to give you that answer. I'm utterly convinced that there is no good age to give your child a smartphone or social media. Okay. Any child. There is too little upside, and the risk is far too great. I mean, I mentioned before, and we don't have to wonder about this. I'm not just making this up, but if the average child is spending 4 to 5 hours on social media alone, average, that means there are some kids spending 7, 8, 9 hours. Now, of course, there are only some children who might only spend 1 or 2. But even then, I mean, what wonderful benefit are they gaining from that we cannot do without, that we have to risk their childhood for? Yes, there's probably a very, very small minority of children who would use phones extremely responsibly and perhaps better than you and I. But are we really going to risk it for all of children in the world for the sake of a very tiny percentage of children who might only use their phone for an hour a day? There's nothing they're getting out of a phone that they can't get in other ways. They want to listen to music. There's other ways to listen to music. And by the way, we're not saying don't have technology. Like sure, you've got to do some homework online because that's what the teacher has set for you. Then go ahead and do it. You just don't need to have that device that's constantly pinging in your pocket.
That's right. And that element of knowing that would to your point, I think you raise a point that you've made me think in terms of a perspective it is perspective, isn't it? Because you've said, yes, you are going to have a phone. Therefore, what you've basically said is you have ownership of, as in this is something that's yours. It's a mindset is what I'm kind of talking to, Dany, in that regard, in terms of what you're talking about, is it plays a very different part, a role in the psyche when it's like, yes, you can have a phone. That means a lot of things in the brain.
Yeah. And look, my children do still, if they need to make phone calls to their friends, I say, here's my phone, make the phone call, make the FaceTime call, have a chat, get 3 or 4 of you on the line together and have a wonderful, raucous time, and they do. And those times are precious for them. It means they don't have to do it, though, for 4 hours a night, liking each other's posts, all that pressure as a teenager to be in the clique and to have to like everything and put photos of yourself that have to be run through filters in order to, maintain an image and all those pressures. They just don't need it.
Yes. I love this. So when my daughter asks me again next time, no, Dany Elachi from Heads Up Alliance says no. And this is an official body. You can look them up. They exist. This is me talking to my daughter. So the answer is no. I'm just kidding. No, I'll absolutely take. But it is. It's that I am saying this in jest, of course. But I think there's a lot to take away in terms of it being thought-provoking. And I know for me, particularly and personally, you've left me thinking about how there are conversations out there about setting boundaries and, being safe and don't post a lot, and all those limitations, and how in your mind that's quashed, means nothing, and still real with conviction in terms of just no to access and delaying that. So thank you, Dany.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Sirine. I think we're being unfair on our children when we give them a device of that nature and then say to them, now manage it well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. Dany, it's been such a pleasure. And thanks for your generosity and time as well. I'm like, I need to let you go and have a Friday night. But just before I let you go, it is our mixtape hour. You have kindly given us a song to kick us off. Our theme tonight is songs about children, kids, all with those words in the title. Can you tell us about the song that you've gone with and why you've chosen it?
Okay, so I've selected The Greatest Love of All by Whitney Houston. And the reason I chose it is because that song speaks to the value of our children, the importance of raising them well, and to teach them to be confident from within, not necessarily through Insta likes, follows, and other external validation. So yeah, I hopefully...
fits the bill for sure. Fits the brief. Yeah. Dany, thank you again so much for your time and for your insights. Like I said, very thought-provoking conversation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Sirine.
Thank you. Dany Elachi, founder of Heads Up Alliance.